In this video, I will talk about some of the information from Chapter 1 of this Human Anatomy and Physiology 11th edition textbook. There are 5 learning objectives that will be covered from this chapter, and in this video I'll cover the first, which is what are anatomy and physiology and how are they related, that is, related to each other. So, what are anatomy and physiology? Pretty simply, anatomy refers to the structure of the body, and physiology refers to the functions of the body. So structure is anatomy, function is physiology. If you think even for a moment about this, you should realize that the function of the body will completely depend on its structure. So these two are inextricably linked. We can also say that these two things, anatomy and physiology, are complementary. Complementarity just is a way of describing the fact that function depends on structure. And here's an example of what I'm saying. We have teeth, and these teeth come in different shapes. So they all have a certain hardness that allows them to pull apart food items for our digestion. But at the front of our mouths, we have incisors. And these incisors are sharp. They have flat edges, which is allowing them to cut. So they're cutting like scissors. So the structure is those sharp edges. The function is cutting like scissors. So in this case, the carrot is being cut into a digestible portion. Once you have bitten off this smaller piece, we also have molars in the back, and they, rather than having sharp edges, have wide, flat surfaces. This is the structure, that wide, flat surface. That's the anatomy. The physiology is the fact that these are designed for grinding. So because of that wide, flat surface, these molars are good at grinding food into much smaller pieces, again for further digestion. If you were to look at any structure in the body, you would see this kind of linkage, where the structure makes that particular item on the body, whether it's ears or nose or mouth, whatever we're looking at, the structure is going to be linked to what the function of that structure is. We can also divide anatomy and physiology into subdivisions. So we can look at different topics within anatomy, for instance. If you start at the big end of anatomy, we have gross anatomy, also known as macroscopic anatomy. Even within this, there are different ways of subdividing gross anatomy. We can look at it regionally. That means that you might look at the arms first, and you would start with, say, the integumentary system of the arms, and then move into the muscular system of the arms, the nervous system of the arms, the cardiovascular system of the arms, and the skeletal system of the arms. And then you would move on to legs, and then thorax and abdomen. You would study one region at a time. Systems anatomy is such that you would study each organ system. So we would start with the integumentary system of the entire body. We might move into the muscular system of the entire body, followed by the nervous system of the entire body, etc. And finally, we have surface anatomy. This is a more clinical subdivision in which you're looking at the surface for clues about what's happening underneath. So let's say, for instance, there's a bone sticking out from your wrist. Well, that probably shouldn't be like that, meaning we have just identified an issue based on surface anatomy. Microscopic anatomy can include cytology and histology. Cytology is the study of cells, and histology is the study of tissues. Finally, we can think about developmental anatomy, and this is just anatomy from the perspective of development. In particular, we can think about embryology, This is the study of different stages and structures of the embryo and how they contribute to the important functions of the embryo during development. So this semester, we're going to look at the integumentary, skeletal, muscular, and then the nervous systems. And we're going to do that one at a time. Of which subdivision of gross anatomy is this an example? So another way of asking that is, which approach to anatomy are we taking in this class? And you should be able to identify it as one of these three. So now let's move on to the topics of physiology. So we have organ systems. So same as in anatomy, we have these different organ systems. That's more or less what we're looking at this semester. We can also look at the cellular and molecular events underlying physiology. So for instance, how do cells interact to create tissues? How do molecules interact to allow all body activities? Those are some cell and molecular physiology questions. We can look at the basic physical principles, especially when we get into the muscular and nervous systems. You will hear a lot about electrical properties of cells and how they contribute to the functions of those systems. We're also going to talk about pressures and concentration gradients and how those contribute to normal function. And finally, we can think about physiology at the chemical level. So thinking about chemical bonds and creating molecules and creating functions in the body, as well as biochemistry doing basically the same things.